Good morning. It's Monday, March 2nd, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, thousands of people march in central Moscow to honor opposition politician Boris Nemtsov, who was shot dead on Friday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington a day ahead of a speech to the U.S. Congress over the Iran nuclear deal. And later on in the show, veteran actor Leonard Nimoy, who delighted sci-fi fans worldwide with his iconic role as the pointy-eared half-human, half-Vulcan Mr. Spock in the Star Trek television series and films, dies at the age of 83. Good morning, I'm Meredith Ross. We begin in Russia, where tens of thousands of people marched through central Moscow yesterday in memory of murdered opposition politician and former Deputy Prime Minister Boris Nemtsov. Demonstrators held banners saying, "I am not afraid," and Russia without Putin, blaming the authorities for his killing, though Putin vowed to find his killer. An avid critic of the Kremlin, Nemtsov was shot dead while walking home on Friday night in the capital city. Many believe he was killed because of a march he had planned for Sunday to demonstrate against Russia's operations in East Ukraine and Putin's economic policies that ended up instead honoring his legacy. And we are joined in studio by Channel 2 Foreign Affairs editor Arad Nir. Good morning, Arad.
Good morning,
Thank you for being here this morning. Before we discuss it, let's break this down and take a look at the following update from the I-24 News Desk.
Crowds gathered in central Moscow Sunday, but one person was sorely missing. Boris Nemtsov was supposed to lead the opposition march, but his supporters are now marching to mourn his death. Thousands of people laid flowers and lit candles on a bridge near the Kremlin, where the opposition politician and former deputy prime minister was shot dead late Friday. At 55, Nemtsov, a fighter against corruption, had long pushed for the opposition's revival. The rally on Sunday was meant to protest Russian President Vladimir Putin's economic policies and Russia's involvement in the separatist war in East Ukraine.
If you're talking about the atmosphere, the context in which it happened, I could say that Ukraine came to Moscow or Donbass came to Moscow. The violence that we witness daily on our TV screens, the violence that's very frequently glorified by state propaganda, this violence could not but finally take root in Russia.
Both within Russia and outside, criticism of Putin, whom many believe is responsible for the killing, is steadily rising.
What I'm frustrated by is the reaction of the West, the reaction of the British government, the reaction of the European Union, not just to this, but to all the things that are going on, which is that everyone seems to think that Putin is a man who can be negotiated with. He can't.
And as crowds continue to gather in Moscow, Nemtsov's murder is increasing concern about the future safety of the opponent of President Vladimir Putin.
And also joining us from Moscow is Moscow Times journalist Yvonne Netuparenko. Thank you for being with us this morning.
You're welcome.
Now, we saw large demonstrations over the killing of Boris Nemtsov. How popular was he in Russia?
Well, people know him, but I don't think many people supported his political views. Many people supported him in Moscow, but if you take Russia overall, I think 68% of the people didn't sympathize with his views. 18% did sympathize with his views. So he wasn't very well supported, really, in the last years at least.
So you're saying Moscow as a city is more supportive of the opposition as a whole as opposed to the rest of the country?
Yes, that was always the case. Moscow, St. Petersburg.
So stay on the line. We're just coming here to studio to Arad Nir. So the timing of Nemtsov's killing is really interesting, and it almost draws a comparison to the recent killing or murder-suicide, whatever it be called, in Argentina of the prosecutor Alberto Nisman, who was about to supposedly reveal information, and then he was quieted.
Well, the timing was when his criticism towards the regime, to Putin's regime, was intolerable. Now, there are various conspiracy theories who killed him and why he was killed, but the common knowledge or the general perception in various capitals around the world is that the tracks lead to the Kremlin. either directly or indirectly. So the fact of the matter is that Boris Nemtsov was inconvenient to the one who is sitting behind the Kremlin walls, and he was eliminated whenever it was possible to eliminate him.
And you use the word intolerable with regard to his criticism because he was very outspoken. And Ivan, we understand that in his final interview, he said some very harsh things regarding Putin. He had a lot of harsh criticism. Can you tell us about that?
Well, he's been saying harsh things for years. He published a report about Putin's life of luxury. This was several years ago. He has claimed that Putin lives in luxurious palaces and enjoys a life of opulence with yachts, with expensive watches and airplanes. So I wouldn't say that anything has changed in the recent time. I've known Nemtsov personally. He was telling me about how they're going to capture the Kremlin 3 years ago. So I wouldn't say something has changed recently, really.
Just in general, I believe these words were just really strong, in particular when he was talking about him in the last interview. But what are people saying there? Is there a general feeling that the president was behind this killing, and is it causing even more outrage?
What people say is that it's not the president directly, but they say that the whole atmosphere of hatred and aggression created by the media over the Ukraine conflict is the ultimate killer in this situation. Many people were holding posters that were saying propaganda kills, and it seems that it's very plausible that this is what it was. It's not necessarily Putin himself, but people, for instance, volunteers who went to fight in eastern Ukraine, who came back and heard Nemtsov saying on the radio that what they do is wrong, and they could have done it. I mean, they have the arms and they participated in this war. So, I mean, there are many versions now. Depending on people's political affiliation, they will say whatever they think is true, but we don't have any proof of any of them yet.
Right, and obviously an investigation needs to be launched, but authorities are saying, there are reports that the authorities are saying that the opposition killed him in order to create a martyr and further unite the movement. Is this just a deflection?
Well, this is the unfortunate thing, that both the government and the opposition use this murder, well, not everybody, but many people use this murder to put their own political beliefs further. But I would say that people at large at the march, the 50,000 people that came, 90% of came to mourn the person they knew and the person they have associated their lives with. Nemtsov was especially popular in the 90s, for instance. So for many people, he is a symbol of this time, of their youth, of their hopes for the better in Russia. So I think it's not just politics here, it's also personal touch as well.
And you know, regarding these demonstrations that we saw yesterday, Arad, how do you think the authorities received these demonstrations? Because it's a country that fear of the government tends to be so deeply felt. What did that mean for people to go out to the streets like that?
Well, it takes a lot of courage to go out on the streets, and you know, the numbers of those who showed up vary. The official number, I think, goes around 16 or 17,000 people. The opposition tries to show that there were about 60 or 70,000 people, and we heard from Moscow now that the average seems to be about 50,000 people. They wanted to get 100,000 people. Many people showed up. But as we heard before, this show of opposition is marginalized to the big cities of Russia. There is no effective opposition in Russia. Some people in the West are trying to magnify the force of opposition in Russia, but Putin manages to crash all kind of opposition. As we see, you know, this is not the first political assassination in Russia, and in all cases, they found some people to put the guilt on, and they never traced those who sent them.
And you know, Ivan, his killing was really reminiscent of previous political assassinations that Arad mentioned, wasn't it?
Of course, it was, and they probably we won't find out. We won't be given any proof who has done it. Like with Politkovskaya, for instance, with this famous journalist who worked in Chechnya, we know who has killed her, but we don't know who has ordered the killing. So it's very similar, of course.
So then how dangerous is it to be part of the opposition, especially an outspoken person in Russia?
Of course, people assume a certain degree of threat, and it's not just about getting killed. It's also about going into prison. It's also about being marginalized, silenced. So it's a major endeavor for life if you're doing this.
Mm-hmm. And there's something that I want to mention. In an interview yesterday, Rod, prominent opposition figure Garry Kasparov said that Nemtsov's murder has dampened any hope for a peaceful political transition in Russia. What do you make of his comments?
Well, I know Garry Kasparov personally, and I know that he really mourns this loss, and he really looks for a change in Russia. But this change is long way to go, you know. I would point out a statement that was issued yesterday after the murder by Mikhail Khodorkovsky, one of the moguls, one of the oligarchs that was jailed for a decade or so by Putin because of his activities for the opposition. Khodorkovsky mourned the loss of Nemtsov, but he didn't point on anyone who did it. And this actually shows exactly how opposition can be effective in today's Russia. So coming back to Garry Kasparov, he has a very comfortable house in New York, big bank account, big sponsors, but you know, he can talk from the outside. He tried to do something in Russia, but he fled, and he is criticizing from abroad, which is from exile, I would say.
From a safer place.
Yes, but it cannot be effective. I cannot see any effectiveness to it, at least not in the very near future.
Well, we will end on this note. Rodnir, thank you very much, and do stay put for our next segment. And Yvonne, thank you very much for joining us from Moscow. And moving on, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington a day before he is set to deliver his speech warning of an impending Iranian nuclear deal to U.S. Congress. It comes as the U.S. and 5 other world powers are reportedly making progress in Geneva with Iran over its nuclear program. The highly contested speech also comes just 2 weeks ahead of Israeli elections, a reason why most of America's top brass politicians, including President Obama, say they will not be in attendance. But many political figures and analysts in both the U.S. and Israel fear that this speech will further damage already tense relations between the two administrations. And a recent poll revealed that 48% of Americans believe his speech should have been approved by the White House. So we are joined in studio by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Good morning, Tal. Thanks for being here with us. And Channel 2, again, Channel 2 Foreign Affairs editor Rodnir, still here with us, but to speak about a very different topic. So thank you for being here as well. So let's begin. Where to begin? So Tal, I'll begin with you. We've seen a lot of pushback from American politicians. Are we going to see in the hours leading up to this any more last-ditch efforts to either get him to stop speaking or to make a point against Netanyahu?
Well, I think the hope that Netanyahu would refrain from speaking to Congress has been demolished a few weeks ago already. But definitely this has been there's been a very dramatic build-up to this speech that will be happening tomorrow, and the dramatic build-up will continue in the next 24 hours. Today, Netanyahu will be giving his rehearsal, his rehearsal speech addressing AIPAC, the AIPAC Policy Conference. But after that, the administration actually has 2 opportunities to answer him. So in the past few days, we've been seeing that the Obama administration, the White House, and their allies have launched quite an impressive attack against Netanyahu. Nobody is mistaken that they're not happy, that they're happy about this speech. We heard Susan Rice, we heard Secretary of State John Kerry. We had briefings to journalists, but today, after Netanyahu gives his AIPAC speech, the president will be giving a special interview in which he will be addressing Netanyahu's upcoming Congress speech. And later on tonight, Susan Rice herself will be addressing AIPAC. So the administration has two opportunities to answer Netanyahu's rehearsal speech, which will be happening this afternoon.
So we will be keeping our eyes on that. But focusing on the American Capitol, earlier today, we spoke with I-24 News correspondent Ellie Hockenberg, who was in Washington, D.C. Here's what she told us.
Long weeks of anticipation during which probably everything was already said about it, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrives in Washington, D.C. for a short period of time, but a highly packed one, with two main issues on the agenda: Iranian nuclear talks and U.S.-Israel relations. So let's start with the main topic, the Iranian nuclear talks. Well, after U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry hinted Netanyahu has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to the details of the discussed agreement with Iran, a senior official at the Prime Minister's entourage said Israel holds a significant amount of trustworthy information regarding the deal taking shape with Iran. The official further said there are many compromises by world powers such which counter Israel's interests. Now, when it comes to the alleged crisis in the relationship between Washington and Jerusalem, the source said Netanyahu himself held a phone conversation with the U.S. Secretary of State Kerry on Saturday night before he boarded his flight to Washington, mentioning meetings between U.S. and Israeli officials throughout recent weeks, including between Israeli and American national security advisors Yossi Cohen and Susan Rice in the White House. It was noted that Cohen made it very clear during this meeting that Netanyahu was not attempting to harm relations with the U.S., but rather only warn against a bad deal and a bad and a dangerous deal with Iran. And last but not least, regarding the timing, the official said the speech was scheduled because of the end of March deadline of the Iran talks and not because of the Israeli election. So this is what happened, and now quickly to what is about to happen. At 10 a.m. Monday, Washington time, Netanyahu will carry out a speech at the AIPAC conference later on today. American National Security Advisor Susan Rice will speak at the conference as the representative of the Obama administration. At the same time, by the way, Kerry himself is scheduled to meet with Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif in an attempt to make progress in the nuclear talks. And on Tuesday, the very expected Netanyahu speech in Congress. So there's a lot on the plate, and we will, of course, keep you updated throughout this visit.
So as was mentioned there in the report from Washington, the Iranian nuclear deal apparently is making some progress, and both sides seem to be making concessions. What exactly is the latest from that, Arad?
Unfortunately, Meredith, I think that this question is irrelevant at the moment, because regardless of what's in the deal, there is no deal yet. And the Americans say it now and again, and I tend to take their point or their side regarding it, not because I trust the Americans more than I trust the Israeli Prime Minister, but because I know how generally dealing with Iran is, and there is no deal until there is a deal. Negotiations go until the very last moment. Now, Netanyahu and his ministers claim that they know more than the Americans know because they have various kinds of information. But again, this is not the issue at the moment. You know, we are in the midst of absurd theater, or theater of absurd, and one of the scenes in this theater, in this show, in this play, will be seen this afternoon or this evening in Israel tonight, as Tal was mentioning here earlier. You know, the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of the United States cannot talk to each other. So they talk via speeches and television interviews. This is absurd. You know, whatever, I really look into, I anticipate the interview that will be given by President Obama, since what Netanyahu will say, we know by now. The question is how he will say it, what gimmicks he will be using. But I'm really anxious to know what Obama will answer and how will Netanyahu reciprocate. And he likes really this verb, reciprocating, to reciprocate. So, this is the absurd of the matter, part of the absurd of the matter, and I can go on, but I'll let Tal talk too.
No, I just think it turned into such a dirty game. I mean, the level of even vicious remarks we've been hearing from both sides, but especially in the American discourse in recent weeks regarding Netanyahu, regarding the speech from both sides, has been, I don't remember such rhetoric being attached to the Israeli topic at all.
You are young, I'm older than you, I don't remember either.
So,
point made, yeah.
And it's also turned into a vicious, like a very disgusting discourse inside, as we said, inside the American public, because Netanyahu is a pawn in many ways in the Republican-Democrat struggle. So after the White House and the administration and the Democratic Party are giving Netanyahu a clear snub, the Republicans are embracing Netanyahu, and some of them doing it maybe in a not the most tasteful way. We saw the ad against Susan Rice that was published yesterday, on Saturday in the New York Times. And there was also a video distributed on Saturday by William Crystal, who is considered, who is the editor of the Weekly Standard, leader of the Emergency Committee for Israel. It's a pro-Israel group. They submitted, they brought Hillary Clinton into the debate. Let's see how that looks.
President Obama is holding secret talks with Iran, even as Iran threatens to wipe Israel off the map. The Israeli Prime Minister is coming to Washington, but Obama won't talk to him. Instead, Obama and anti-Israel Democrats are boycotting him. Israel's friends, Democrats and Republicans, are fighting back. But where's Hillary Clinton? Does she support the boycotters? Or is she too afraid to stand up to them?
So is this perhaps a stab at Hillary before she maybe runs for president?
Exactly. So the Republicans are launching the campaign even before it started, and Netanyahu is the subject of the campaign. And it reminds us even, I mean, it brings us back to a few months before the 2012 elections, how Netanyahu and the Iranian issue were serving attached to Mitt Romney. So we can see that this linkage between Netanyahu and his Republican allies is not going away. It will probably continue to accompany us in the upcoming weeks too. Upcoming months until the elections too.
Yes, and speaking about the elections here in Israel, how are political parties here using this speech to gain votes?
Well, they're being very delicate about it. Maybe Arad disagrees, but I think they're not in an all-out war against it. Politicians are afraid because Obama is widely unpopular in Israel. So I think some of the parties are afraid to launch an attack on this issue, afraid that it would counter-affect them and actually strengthen Netanyahu and only make them lose in the polls. But the fact is, this week the agenda has been conquered by Netanyahu. Nobody will be this speech, at least until Tuesday evening. Everything on the agenda is only the Netanyahu speech, not the cost of living, not the scandals, not the state comptroller reports, not the housing prices. So this week is definitely controlled by Netanyahu, and his opponents are kind of left with empty hands, don't have the real facilities or tools to deal with it.
So you think they're treading lightly. But, interestingly enough, Netanyahu's party, many members of his party are saying that that this could really help the campaign, his speech.
Well, they hope it will help the campaign. They are going downhill recently in polls, and they hope that this will help them to turn around and climb up the hill again and at least gain 2 more mandates, 2 more seats in the Knesset, at least in the polls at the moment. This is their hope. And, funny enough, I totally agree with what Tal have just said regarding the other parties. They are afraid to talk. Everybody is afraid to talk that Iran should not be the issue in this election. We have the Palestinian issue, we have economical issue, we have social issues, we have the housing issue. There are various issues around, and this week the whole political sphere is letting Netanyahu dictate the agenda. The only party that I've seen criticizing it would be Meretz, and they...
This is the left party?
It is the left to the center, definitely, party. And they actually produced another, ad yesterday that was aired around mocking Netanyahu for mentioning Iran the whole time and not dealing with any other issues. But the fact that the other parties are not daring to criticize it show that maybe he has a point and it may play into his side.
So he has kind of monopoly on the issue. There's also this thing that in Israel, the minute you criticize, it's not customary to criticize Netanyahu while he's abroad on a mission that, at the end of the day, does have something to do with the with Israel's security, with the country's security. Every time, if politicians assuming Zionist Union leader Yitzhak Herzog would speak up, he would be immediately slammed by the right wing that he's anti-Zionist, that he's working against the state's interests. It's such a delicate issue, one that the Israeli public has been intimidated upon much.
It should also be mentioned that Herzog is being criticized as people don't view him as a true leader. And Netanyahu, agree with him or not, he is making a very bold move.
Well, both of them
are
competing on that leadership ticket. Definitely Netanyahu has a forelead, but interesting enough, they both went back to history on Saturday night. It was an interesting, there's a traditional Saturday evening, the minute Shabbat leaves, and all of the political correspondents are swamped with new videos and new YouTubes. So each one of them took a former Prime Minister, Levi Eshkol, who was Prime Minister in the 60s in the Six-Day War. Each one of them took Levi Eshkol as a model of comparison at Netanyahu, trying to downplay the differences with the United States, bringing out his relationship, bringing out the incidents of the disagreements between Levi Eshkol and the administration at the time, and also Herzog trying to boost his leadership. If we have time, we can watch the videos.
Let's see one.
1967, צבאות ערב מאיימים על קיומה של מדינת ישראל. לוי אשכול עומד בפני החלטה גורלית. האם לצאת להתקפת מנע? הבית הלבן מתנגד בתוקף. לוי אשכול מורה על ההתקפה בניגוד לעמדת הממשל.
What are your reactions to this quickly?
Just one note, Meredith. We have to remember that if Netanyahu decides any time to do something regarding Iran, he'd have to use American aircraft, American bombs, American know-how, and American umbrella to do it, and it's unwise to stick this finger into the Americans' administration.
Okay, well, we will end on that note. Thank you very much for being here, Rodnir and Tal Shalev, for this discussion. And coming up next, an Egyptian court puts Hamas on a terror list. We'll hear all about it. But first, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines. Welcome back. Let's say hello and good morning to I-24 News editor, Ruti Nai, who joins us today to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
Good morning, Meredith.
Ruti.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. You know,
really?
Lots of riveting stuff on the show so far, with the Bibi speech coming up.
And great weather.
It's been great weather, yes, after quite a stormy February.
Yeah. Right.
Now it's March. So what are the
the Ides of March? No, I'm kidding. Okay.
Wow.
All right.
It does seem that way.
So 1990s terrible war in what was Yugoslavia, ethnic cleansing, thousands killed, thousands of Bosnian Muslims killed. Yes. A lot of them then applied to go to the United States. They get into the United States. About 120,000 people get visas to move to the United States. And then it turns out that some of these people were had actually committed severe atrocities during this ethnic cleansing. cleansing, and should not really have been given visas to come to the United States. The Immigration Naturalization Services opened up a unit to find, these suspected war criminals, and according to the item published by the New York Times, BBC picked it up. Essentially, they're going to deport 150 of them, and officials are saying the numbers may go up as high as 600 from among those who either hid information about their military service or actually there's information to suspect that they may have taken part in the killings, which were, we now, in the recent past year, we've been talking about Islamic State, but those horrible killings, it was unbelievably
History
cruel.
kind of repeats itself, so it'll be interesting to see how they are received back in their home country after being deported. I wonder if they'll be trying to really keep it on the down low.
I don't envy them, but then I don't envy the people that they did this to either.
Exactly.
Okay, speaking of atrocities and cruelty and so on, so as we know, this past weekend, Jihadi John was unmasked, a fellow by the name of Mohammed Emwazi. Right. Telegraph tells the story, it's actually from the Daily Mail, they picked it up, tells the story of how Emwazi, who was on the radar of the intelligence services in Britain, felt threatened after the 2005 terrorist attacks in London and then 2010 terrorist attacks, and he was contacted by intelligence officials who supposedly tried to buy a computer from him. He's a computer programmer, and he suspected that they were onto him, and he sent some emails to the Daily Mail at the time saying, I feel like a dead man walking, I may just take an overdose and do away with myself. Guy sounds a bit off his rocker, to put it in layman's terms, not a psychiatrist.
I read that he was confronted by the British intelligence many times.
Yeah. But at that one particular time, he actually expressed a wish to do away with himself, which one, knowing what we know now, it would have been a good idea, I'm sorry to say.
No, he's doing away with others in brutal ways.
Exactly. Okay, moving on to some happier news. Kurdish, uprising against Turkey has been going on for many years. Right. The jailed head of the Kurdish, of what's known as the PKK, which is the Kurdish militia, has been jailed since, 15 years or something. He's on some island. And he issued a call over the weekend to all his followers to lay down their arms and sit down for serious talks with Turkish authorities. Turkish authorities, of course, are welcoming this. Obviously,
but not necessarily willing to put down their arms. This is
obviously,
struggle of power here.
Devil is in the details and how this will all pan out. But it's still, it's got a good feel to it in the sense that, a bit like the Mandela thing, imprisoned for years on an island and then finally coming to terms with the situation and calling on his people to sit down and find a solution
after decades of tensions.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be a breakthrough.
Tension and deaths and terror attacks. PKK is considered a terror organization. On to a sad story. 14-year-old girl in Chile suffering from cystic fibrosis, is very, very ill, and she sent a message to the Chilean president, Bachelet, who happens also to be a pediatrician, just as a point of interest, telling her, listen, I want to die, I can't stand this suffering anymore. Chile does not have a law on euthanasia, so they can't grant her request. But Bachelet came to visit her. They took a selfie, as we can see in this photo in The Guardian. And how this is going to play out is a big question. But this girl, she's 14. She's obviously incredibly brave. She posted a YouTube video of herself, which went viral. It's all over the world. And in response to that, Bachelet came to visit her.
Why? At least it's a nice gesture from the president.
It is. And, one hopes that sort of between the lines and behind the scenes, I don't know. I don't know if I wish that she gets her wish or not. I'm not sure. Her father respects her wishes, he says.
Interesting. Well, I mean, in that sort of situation, and as you said, she's in a lot of pain.
Yeah,
so
she's in pain. And
this is where the dilemma lies.
No life for her. Yeah. Washington Post has a story about the reopening of the Iraqi National Museum in Baghdad. This is, a direct response to these horrible, horrible scenes we saw over the weekend.
I mean, these are just scenes that are impossible to watch.
Islamic, I agree with you. It's almost more horrible to watch than these killings because they're taking a whole civilization, a whole culture, and just smashing it to smithereens. Why?
And it's
Why?
absolutely irreversible. No respect for history, for human impact on the world. It's
unbelievable. It's horrifying. So this is kind of a response. All these artifacts, they put them together in one place, and we'll open them to the public, and hopefully they will stay intact.
Stay safe there, yes.
Yeah. The Independent, Robert Mugabe, had his 91st birthday. So what was on the menu? Elephants.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Elephant was cooked.
How could you do that?
Yeah, elephants, and there were other animals, impalas, 2 buffaloes, 2 sables, 5 impalas.
Oh my goodness!
Unbelievable. A stuffed crocodile on the menu.
He doesn't seem to, understand how to gain popularity.
$1 million. Well, 91. I mean, I don't think, Yeah. And last but not least,
I want to say it's just old age getting to him, but I don't know.
No, he was always this way. Last but not least, other animals. China's panda population grows 17%, according to the HuffPost. Yeah,
some good
a lot
news
of preservation. Yeah, a lot of preservation efforts. So Mugabe,
Yes, from Mugabe to this is some good news for the animal kingdom, so good to see. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Ruti, for this press review. And in other news, protests broke out yesterday in the Gaza Strip in reaction to a decision by an Egyptian court on Saturday declaring Hamas a terrorist group. The ruling comes less than a month after the organization's armed wing was given the same label. This latest verdict against the Palestinian group is part of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's systematic crackdown on Islamic movements, namely the Muslim Brotherhood, which shares deep ties with Hamas following the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi. Now, this comes as President al-Sisi arrived on an official visit to Saudi Arabia for talks with the new king to discuss a joint anti-terrorism force in the region and to bolster economic relations between the two countries. So we are joined in studio today by I-24 News Middle East analyst Ali Waqet. Good morning. But first, let's take a look at the latest from Egypt, and we'll continue from there.
A meeting of the minds. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi arrived in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia Sunday for talks with perhaps his most important regional ally, new Saudi monarch King Salman. For Sisi in particular, there is urgent business on the agenda. With the emergence of an Islamic State terrorist threat in Libya, the Egyptian leader is eager to rack up support for a joint Arab military force to counter the jihadist threat and enforce stability in the region. Sisi told Al Arabiya he sees Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan as his partners in this initiative, which is still in its formative stages. The Saudis, too, are worried about IS, but are also looking to counter a spreading Iranian Shiite influence in the Middle East. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will also visit Riyadh this week to ease concerns about a possible nuclear deal with Iran. The new king is eager to mend rifts that have emerged in the Sunni camp in recent years and to reassert the Saudi monarchy's status as the leading force within it. Indeed, Sisi reiterated his commitment to an Egyptian-Qatari reconciliation effort initiated by the late Saudi King Abdullah. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is also in Saudi Arabia and will be meeting separately with King Salman on Monday. There is no shortage of tension between Egypt and Turkey, particularly over Erdogan's support for the Muslim Brotherhood, which has been characterized as a terrorist group in Egypt. Sisi called on Turkey to stop interfering in Egyptian affairs and claimed the timing of the mutual visit was a coincidence. There were no indications Sunday that the Turkish and Egyptian leaders planned to meet. Also on Sunday, the Brotherhood's Palestinian sister movement Hamas was itself declared a terrorist group by an Egyptian court. Hamas leaders have been received warmly in Ankara in recent years.
It is a shocking and dangerous decision that targets the Palestinian people and the Palestinian resistance that is defending the dignity of Palestine and the Arab nation. It also goes against the rules as it relates to the Israeli enemy as a friend and to Hamas, the Palestinian people, and the Palestinian resistance as an enemy.
These tensions may complicate Saudi efforts to form a united Sunni front against extremist regional factions. But common interests do exist, and many are hoping that these prevail.
So, Ali, let's begin with his visit in Saudi Arabia. So as we heard, Sisi is proposing the creation of an anti-terrorism force, mainly consisting of Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So what do you make of this? And does this represent perhaps a split in the Arab world?
Well, first, Meredith, we should take into consideration the leakings of some dialogues between Abdel Fattah Sisi and some of his assistants against the Arab Gulf states and defining them as idiots who just put money in Egypt. And the assistants suggest that we should ask the biggest amount possible because the Saudis and the other Gulf states do not calculate their donations. So Abdel Fattah Sisi will go there and present his apologies to the videos and audios that were published of the dialogues between him and his assistants.
Can we expect Saudi Arabia to give them any money now after this
yes, because
damning reveal? I mean, this is pretty...
I think the Saudis will continue their traditional support to Egypt, but I think it was very embarrassing for Abdel Fattah Sisi to see these videos and audios published mainly in Al Jazeera, and he will first of all apology to what was published, and second to clarify that for Egypt, Saudi Arabia is a very important and strategic ally, is the leader of the Arab world, and it is important because Abdel Fattah Sisi needs Saudi Arabia in his fights against the jihadism, and
like
of course for the very difficult economy of Egypt, that without the support of the Gulf, without the support of Saudi Arabia, cannot be in any way rehabilitated. This is on one thing. On the other thing, of course, Abdel Fattah Sisi will try to convince the Saudis that the fight against terror should not be focused on precise region in the world, but also in other areas in the Middle East, that there is no difference between the Islamist groups in Libya and between the Islamist groups in Sinai. And this comes when we know that the Saudi establishment has good relations with some of those jihadist groups, Al-Nusra Front and other Islamic groups that are fighting in Libya, and mainly that are fighting in Iraq and in Syria.
So in what way do you mean they have good relations with these groups?
Good relation, according to the Iraqi government, according to the Syrian government, and according to the Libyan government, Qatar and Saudi Arabia are financing some of these jihadist groups in Iraq against the Shiite government, in Syria against the regime of Bashar al-Assad, and this is why it would be very interesting to see whether the Saudis and the Egyptians will broadcast at the same wave regarding this fight against terror. Because the last thing that the Saudis want to see is Abdel Fattah Sisi weakened and the Muslim Brotherhood once again taking power, in spite of the fact that we are hearing that there might be a reconsideration of the Saudis to their historical relations with the Muslim Brotherhood.
And in the last minute or so that we have, Ali, I do want to talk about this decision to label Hamas a terrorist organization by an Egyptian court. Now, what kind of ramifications will this have on Hamas, and will it affect the border crossing in Rafah and other factors of society?
It is already affecting. The Egyptians are insisting that elements and members of Hamas were killed in clashes between the Egyptian security forces and jihadists in Sinai, and that cells of Hamas were dismantled in Egypt, not far from Cairo. And Hamas, of course, is considering this as a political gesture that aims to turn the attention of the Egyptians from the failures of the Egyptian army in Sinai, and to point Hamas as the responsible of all these failures.
Well, thank you, Ali Waqid, very much for these updates this morning. But coming up next, Leonard Nimoy, Star Trek's Mr. Spock, dies at 83. We'll hear more about the man and his legacy. But first, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines. Welcome back. It's still Monday, March 2nd, 2015. This is still the morning edition, and I am still Meredith Ross. Thank you for staying with us. Now, the next topic is for the Star Trek fans among you. Star Trek legend Leonard Nimoy has died at the age of 83. The actor, famous for playing the role of logical science officer Mr. Spock in the long-running sci-fi series, passed away at his Bel Air home on Friday. Now, to hear more about the man and the legend, we are joined in studio by Channel 10's culture editor, Chen Lieberman.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, sad news, but also reflecting on a character that people absolutely loved.
Absolutely love. And you know, before we spoke about the spectrum of autism, I think that Spock was kind of a reflection of a cerebral, logical, half-human, half-alien, and maybe today we would refer to him as Asperger. But he showed us a way of logical thinking, and it was inspiring, I think. And for a few days now, I've been practicing the salute. It's not working. It's working for you. It's like, no,
it's a bit difficult. I guess you have to be a diehard.
I'm limited. I guess. Yeah, I guess you have to. But you know, he was born to Orthodox Jews, and he said that he took this salute from the Kohenic blessing. So it's something that he saw as a child. Yeah, as an Orthodox Jew. So yeah, that's what he.
So this is when like the Jewish priests would bless the congregation, which they still do, by the way. But you know, we do have a report on this. Let's take a look back at the man.
I'll be practicing
and the character that
in the meanwhile. Maybe when we get back, I'll be.
Let's have a look.
Words from William Shatner. I loved him like a brother. We will all miss his humor, his talent, and his capacity to love. The tweets and tributes coming from all around the world, multiple generations of colleagues, ardent fans, and those he inspired, on screen and in space, all honoring Leonard Nimoy.
I see no reason for answers to be couched in riddles.
Star Trek's pointy-eared Vulcan, Mr. Spock, second in command on the Starship Enterprise. Nimoy starred as Spock through 3 primetime seasons back in the 1960s. In a decade of emotion and upheaval, a compelling figure of pure reason.
Most illogical reaction.
He'd returned to the character in a series of Star Trek feature films. 1982's The Wrath of Khan would feature a tearful tribute from Shatner's Captain Kirk.
Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human.
He directed the hugely successful comedy 3 Men and a Baby.
Good night, sweetheart.
He wrote books of poetry, took photographs, even sang fearlessly. In 2007, he met President Obama, a Spock fan, who recalled on Friday greeting Nimoy with the Vulcan salute and Spock's words, "Live long and prosper," the same famous words that concluded Nimoy's final tweet. Leonard Nimoy died in Los Angeles on Friday at the age of 83.
So just to mention, joining us as well is our web correspondent, Eqypt. Thank you very much for being here. So you're going to chime in, but getting back to the man. So you were saying how he grew up to Jewish immigrants, and he created this entire symbol based on.
Yeah, well, he started performing at the age of 8. And then he did small roles in different movies, a lot of B movies, and he also taught method acting at his studio. And then the breakthrough was the Spock role. And since then, it's really interesting to see how he dealt with this identification, because he was very identified with this role. And he had 2 autobiographies. The first one is called I Am Not Spock.
Which people didn't really take a liking to.
Well, the fans didn't. And later on, 20 years later, he published a new autobiography saying, I am Spock. So it was his way of dealing with this conflict. Because, you know, many actors are doing their best to get away from this cult figures, because otherwise they can't progress in other film roles. And he tried to do the same, but it was harder for him because the character is so loved. And it's interesting to think, why is Spock such a likable character? And I think because he lacks the ego. He does not have ego, and that's why it's so charming to see him handle with conflict. He never gets offended.
And the second best haircut in science fiction.
Absolutely. Yeah,
sorry, I forgot about that.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
I mean, the look, you know, we'll get to the look, but I mean, to quote the Chicago Tribune, he made being calm and smart cool. So that really takes away from the ego and then, you know, these macho,
made mean comments,
hot-headed.
Act cool. Yeah, because he didn't invest any emotion in anything. So he was just, you know, clear cut, said things the way they are. Like I said before, it's on the spectrum of autism, but it's very compelling because it's something that exists in all of us, I think. And eventually he stopped trying to get away from that character and he embraced it. And that's more than I can say about most actors. They're trying also always to get away from it. He embraced Spock, and even in a way that critics were like, you know, what are you doing? It's kind of creepy, you know. But he really kept this connection with the fan base of Star Trek.
Well, it was such a unique character, and I mean, as Amit mentioned, the look of the character, there's nothing like it. I mean, the actual look, the haircut, the pointy ears. I mean, it was a really unique costume.
Sci-fi.
But like so little is done with his look. He's not wearing any extreme makeup, just like a couple small touches, the haircut, the ears, and it's done, and it's not human.
Yeah, exactly.
By changing so little.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a major change.
And you can't really imagine, I mean, now you have Zachary Quinto doing Spock in the new franchise that J.J. Abrams is directing.
Which is kind of similar, but...
It's very similar, and it seems like he is trying to act like Leonard Nimoy. He's trying to do Leonard Nimoy, and who also got a guest part in the latest film. The Star Trek film. Yeah, so you could see him there. Now, in recent years, he got more connected to his Jewish roots, and he also did a movie about the Holocaust. He also did a TV movie about Golda Meir, where he played her husband. So he dealt with his Jewish heritage as well throughout the years. But it's kind of sad also to look at his autobiography, I have to say. Maybe, I mean, for him, he's a Hollywood legend, but and also for his fans. But it's sad to see how actors who are doing such cult figures can't really get away from it, and they end up doing, they can't escape that that typecasting. So they end up doing TV films and, you know, just living around that glory days of, you know, of the 1960s. But also William Shatner, he managed to get away from Captain Kirk, but not in a very classy way. You know, he's doing TV commercials. He's doing also TV series.
Also he, pulp cover.
You know,
so it's a little sad. But
also he played a human.
He played human.
So he played sort of a more regular character.
It was easier for him.
Spock was just so visual. It's just so hard to get away from that. So well, you know, I wonder how Trekkies will be.
I mean, you know, today you see these kind of characters all the time, but back then in the 1960s, it was a big deal to see these years. I remember growing up as a child, I was like, what is this thing, right? We were a little scared
you growing up as a child in the 1960s, come on.
No, well, we had the reruns.
Of course we did.
I did grow up in the 60s.
You did
It would be nice to
to be able to say that. Well, thank you very much, Chen, for being here, and of course, R.I.P. Mr. Spock. So we will just try to do this one more time.
I was trying the whole time. I'm rehearsing, but it's not working.
Well, I'm sure many people are doing that across the world in his memory. Okay, so moving on now. Amit, you were here throughout this discussion, so you have the viral spiral that is the web review. So what's the latest on the web?
Okay, so from taking, I scoured the Russian side of the web yesterday, looking at the whole reactions to the. This is the tens of thousands of people who marched in memory of Boris Nemtsov, who was shot and killed near the Kremlin. And it's really interesting to see how the Russian media is kind of struggling to deal with a murder that has, you know, you can't say really clear ties to anything, but the shadow of the Kremlin looms over it.
You know, I was going to say, even in this image, what a powerful image.
The image of the bridge with the Kremlin in the background. It's a movie poster, pretty much. It's insane.
But this image as well, here in this news article as well. I mean, it's just he was shot near the Kremlin, right?
Yes.
So
Now the Steins here are going like they say it's a play on his name, Boris, but they say Boris, which is like an instruction, like struggle, like you guys struggle.
Interesting.
And that is the legacy remaining, and also as you can see all
really powerful images coming out of this.
Yes, and this is from the demonstration. Now, and clearly the media is very careful handling the quite vocal, should we say, hints from the crowd that the government is in some way tied to this. Now, Russia has its history of political assassinations.
Absolutely.
Journalist Anna Politkovskaya was shot a few years ago, shot and killed. He died, a few days before a major opposition march. What is interesting, he was sort of a marginal opposition figure in recent years. He had mostly his the years he invested in fighting against the government, but it was, attention switched to characters like Navalny in the recent years. So now Nemtsov is once again became a symbol, a martyr of the opposition movement.
We have discussed Russia extensively today, but really powerful stuff coming from Moscow. So what else do you have for us?
Okay, so Daily Mail is reporting that Rebecca Brooks, the disgraced News Corps chief, is getting a new job offer from Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch.
Interesting.
Which is, I think, it's mostly interesting in the sense of Murdoch doesn't care.
Yeah.
He can do anything. He's like,
He's a bit controversial,
rehire the shamed CEO who had her hands in all that wiretapping. Of course.
Maybe she's blackmailing him. I'm sure she has a lot of information.
Oh yeah,
so he better take care of her because he's responsible for her fate.
That is a very good conspiracy plotline.
No, I mean, really, who made her do the things she did? It's like it's his responsibility. He should take care of her.
Cause and effect.
Because you always see it when people get into trouble. The people who send them still.
I think if it was just, I think if she was blackmailing him, she would just have him pay her off.
Blackmailing as it's a way of speaking.
Yeah,
to
I know.
Say that he better take care of her.
No,
otherwise.
I think this is a statement. This is a statement of I do what I want, and no allegations make me. I don't care about anything. I have money.
Well, that is a fact. So that
exactly.
Because we didn't know he has money till now.
Yeah.
It's like,
yes.
oh,
but this is like no care money, which is.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that unfolds.
Yes. And
I think I see Sarah Palin there.
Yes, you do. Don't you love her? This is a Vice report from CPAC, one of those Republican conventions. And the Vice angle on this is pretty interesting. They're reporting on what they call the slow death of the right-wing fringe, that the Tea Party as a movement and the whole radical conservatives, the very pro-South, the Confederacy flags are dying out, is what they're saying.
The extreme right in the U.S.
Yes, it was such a powerful trend that swept the American right after the Obama election, and now what they're seeing is. How the Republicans themselves are beginning to ostracize those characters, and I think this is a lesson learned from, well, not from Romney running because he was a relative moderate, but from all the strange characters populating those primaries, such as the Herman Cain, who appeared at the convention. That guy is still around. You remember him?
I think so. Yeah.
Herman Cain, the pizza mogul. Who wanted to run for president and had the 999 tax plan, and we were switched on into never mind. And the one last point about this is the Republican Party trying to regain ground because Democrats' platform in recent times was mostly those guys are weird. Let's stay away from them. And the more normal it gets, at least normal appearing it gets, the harder time they're going to have.
Getting rid of these characters who do
yes,
outrageous things
they still did invite
and...
Phil Robertson as a guest speaker, the guy from Duck Dynasty.
Yeah.
Okay. And he said hippies are responsible for STDs. So some weirdness can still be expected from those people, and this is good because I love Republican weirdness.
Okay, well, let's see what Prince William has been up to.
He went to Japan and dressed up as a samurai, which is embarrassing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, can we?
That seems a little out of character for him.
I don't know.
He's pretty subdued. I mean, as a public figure.
It sounds like something Prince Harry would do.
Yes, but can we?
Do we have a? I don't know if we have that picture, and we are running out of time. But
okay.
I will go look that up because I'm really curious to see Prince William dressed.
People visiting should never wear the national costume. It just looks embarrassing. I'm sorry. So
well, I guess he just wanted to make some headlines. Okay, well, I mean, thank you very much for this web review. But coming up next, we'll hear the latest in tech news. First, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. We're now joined by the Economy Magazine host, Benjamin Chung Alvarez. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So, India
India
is the big story now.
Yes, we've been talking about India a lot in the past, of course, leading up to the elections and now post-elections to actually see what is going to change in India. Of course, last year we were looking at the rupee going down and down and down and down, down further, and investors fleeing massively. There's now a $290 billion budget. A lot of, it's not a big bang budget, so to speak, but at the same time, a lot of people are saying it is going to be a deal changer like in 1991. There are people, of course, in the opposition who don't believe that it's going to necessarily be as groundbreaking. Nevertheless, there are a couple of really important things that it introduces.
Yeah.
There is the corporate tax cut from 30% to 25% over the course of 4 years, which should bring in, more money, potentially. There's universal social security, which is geared at ensuring that India, which of course is known to be a very poor country, even though it is one of the BRICS, in terms of a micro perspective on people, your average Indian in the past has not really had access so much to the basic necessities. So there's that. There's money going directly into the accounts of people, bank accounts. And he also increased availability of bank accounts to more Indians because your average Indian doesn't also necessarily have a bank account. So a lot of things happening really on the micro level, making life better for people. On the macro level,
cuts are actually going to make life better. I mean, is it going to feel like austerity measures, or is it more
no.
corporate level?
Right, so that's the thing. What I mentioned so far is definitely not austerity, right?
Yeah.
What I mentioned so far is basically making life, so to speak, easier. Of course, in order to make life easier, you also at the same time have to, you have to get the money from somewhere else.
Okay.
Something that not everybody in Europe necessarily understands. But situation is, basically making the country, the economy, more interesting for investors to come back, and presumably they'll come back with more money. Of course, actual money from within the country is going to be coming from a surcharge tax, that is going to be levied on,
Lots of words.
Right? surcharge. Right. on people that make more than $160,000 a year. Now, they're considered to be the wealthiest of the wealthiest. When I first read it, the wealthiest of the wealthiest, I was thinking, wow, you read that kind of thing, you're in America, you're in Europe, wherever else, you're thinking, $2 million.
It's all relative.
How much is that, right? It's all relative. So that's $160,000 in India.
That's a lot.
So at the same time, India has been doing a lot better over the past year. From about 2 years ago, when we just had the disastrous sort of situation that we described before, we basically see a prediction of about 8.1 to 8.5% growth in India. Of course, GDP is being calculated differently now. So, the question is, how is that really impacting the growth figures? It's anyone's guess.
So things are hopefully turning up, but we understand that we have
a comment from We have a comment from the finance minister himself, Arun Jaitley.
Let's have it.
Further, the procedures of Indian companies to attract foreign investment, I propose to do away with the distinction between different types of foreign investment, especially between foreign portfolio investment and foreign direct investment, and replace them with composite caps. The sectors which are already on a 100% automatic route would not be affected.
Okay. So I mean, you mentioned that investors were initially running away as the economy got worse and worse, but you think they will be coming back now?
Absolutely. Listen, there are other things that are also being implemented right now. On the one hand, you have the Financial Redressal Agency, which essentially serves as an agency that is there to protect consumers. Any kind of, capital market that is properly managed, so to speak, needs to basically ensure that consumer protection is also enforced. So this agency would do that. In addition, you also have the Indian Financial Code, which is coming as a a gigantic new law or code of law that is going to do away with about 61 different laws that are in existence. Right. That is exactly the kind of reaction that it requires, quite frankly, because, we're looking at 61 laws that have been there in place that have fed crony capitalism, that have fed corruption inside the parliament, outside the parliament. I mean, we're talking about all kinds of people here that have an invested interest in the status quo staying the way it is.
An effort to do away with corruption.
It's going to be a very, very, very hard battle. But Modi seems to be, focused and his objectives are there, and we'll see if he actually manages. At the same time, there are some missed opportunities as well, as we've been told. I mean, subsidies have been slashed to some extent, yet at the same time, crude oil has gone down in price worldwide, and so petroleum subsidies have gone down, but food, subsidies, for example, electricity, have gone up. You have private, state banks rather, still have not been privatized, which would definitely make the economy more efficient, more transparent. Electricity shortages are still rampant. It's something that could definitely be dealt with. And hopefully, as they have promised with these current infrastructure investments that are planned around the country, that might be one of the things that's going to be dealt with as well. And sales taxes, are still really a big issue.
So overall, a lot of efforts to improve the situation. Do you think that will improve the popularity of Prime Minister Modi?
Listen, if he manages to actually do everything that he set out to do, I mean, he'll be a superstar. He'll be a superstar. If he manages to do half of what he sets out to do, he'll be a superstar. Just one last comment.
Yes, please.
One of the things also that he plans to do now, I mean, Mumbai for the longest time had been targeted as becoming the financial center of the international financial center, so to speak, of India, along lines of Singapore and Dubai. Now, it never really quite, came to fruition. But it seems like now Gujarat has been elected, so to speak, as that new financial hub. And there's already, movement happening there. It's set out to be a smart city. It's supposed to create about 1 million jobs, from 700 to about 30,000 over the next 2 years or so. So we'll see. There's a lot of very, very exciting stuff happening.
A lot of positivity coming up at this time. So let's hope it works out and the situation improves, the economy improves. Thank you very much, Benjamin. And of course, don't forget to watch The Economy magazine, hosted by our very own, today at 7:10 p.m. here on I-24 News. So moving on now, we are also joined in studio by I-24 News tech correspondent Shai Ringel. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what's going on in the tech world? We just heard about all about India.
Yeah, we are going to Barcelona. Because the Mobile World Congress is being held nowadays in Barcelona. It's opened yesterday, and it's going to host more than 80,000 people for the next week. If you ask yourself, why do we need a Mobile World Congress?
That sounds pretty serious and amazing for people who love tech.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the place to be.
Yeah, but we need to remember that there was another congress for the tech world, CES, held in January, in January, in Las Vegas. But the Mobile Congress has been growing and growing because mobile has been growing and growing. In 2014, 1.3 billion smartphones were sold worldwide.
Wow.
It's going to be the most widespread technology ever.
Wow.
Even more than the pen. More people are going to have smartphones than pens around the world. We have 2.1 billion people who have smartphones these days around the world, which means that 5 billion people don't have the smartphones, and the Mobile wants to get there. So we're talking about markets like India, and we're talking about markets like China. China is a huge market for the mobile industry. They want to spread the wings in China even more. Out of the biggest 5 companies to sell smartphones around the world, 3 of them are Chinese. One is American, one is Korean. We're going to talk about the Korean in a little while. HTC showed their latest phone, the M9, but the biggest news from yesterday is, of course, from Samsung. Samsung introduced the Samsung Galaxy S6 and the Galaxy S6 Edge that has this
highly
really
anticipated.
Yeah, it was really highly anticipated, the Galaxy S6. It's the flagship phone for Samsung. Samsung is now still the biggest biggest selling company of mobile for the mobile industry, and Samsung has had a really rough year. They've seen a decline in the selling of mobile.
Could this be because of Apple's launch of the brand new iPhone 6?
The iPhone 6 is not just the biggest selling product of Apple, it's going to be the biggest selling product ever for Apple. Apple had such a good quarter, they had the biggest revenue ever in the last quarter of last year, and that's when the iPhone 6 introduced only in the last month of that quarter. So Apple is doing really well on the iPhone 6, but more interestingly, they are doing really well on the iPhone 6 Plus, which is a category, the phablet that was invented by Samsung Note. The huge screen iPhone is a copy of the Samsung huge screen Note.
I was going to say, I mean, we're looking at this image, we were just seeing this image of a hand scrolling on a Samsung. It really does look exactly like the iPhone 6.
Samsung is going after the iPhone. The new Samsung Galaxy 6, I think, is the most beautiful phone they ever got out. I think I didn't like the Samsung S5, I have to say. I thought it looked cheap, and it had that plastic on it that was kind of, for a flagship phone, it looked, I don't know, it felt wrong.
Whereas Apple always looks so sleek and so rich.
Exactly. So the so the Samsung Galaxy S6 has this really nice back of a glass back and front.
It's beautifully curved as well. I mean,
yeah, exactly like the iPhone.
Close up.
Yeah, it's going after the iPhone 6, even in design. It has a 20-megapixel camera on the back and a 5-megapixel on the front. It has a fingerprint reader that the Samsung already had before Apple, but it was really not a good fingerprint reader. So maybe they improved it. I'm waiting to see it. I'm waiting to get my hands.
To get your hands on it, literally.
Yeah, it's going to get. Yeah, it's
Take
going.
Take that baby for a ride.
Yeah, they'll start. They'll start selling it in April.
But how much will it be?
It's going to be like $500.
Comparative to... And even that's the thing, when you say that around 5 billion people still don't have smartphones around the world, perhaps it's because of price. I mean, these things are so expensive.
They're not going to buy the flagship phone. The flagship phone is the phone that the company wants to introduce to the world. This is my best. This is what I can do best. When they want to sell for smaller markets or poor markets, they'll try to introduce cheaper phones. Samsung are very good at it, but they have a problem. They have too many phones. Not to sell, but as a product, they have too many products. They have the Samsung Galaxy S6 and the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge, and they have this cheaper thing and this cooler thing, and
whereas Apple slowly fades out.
They have the one product and the iPhone 6 and another one, iPhone 6 Plus, but it's too expensive for places like China. So China is being dominated by Chinese companies. Chinese companies are, being supported by the government, so there's no one can really compete with those Chinese companies, where 5% of smartphones worldwide are being produced in China. by Chinese company to Chinese people. And it's still a growing market. Most Chinese don't have a smartphone yet. And the Chinese are doing all they can to change that. We're going to see in the next few days the smaller companies introduce new phones to those markets. Firefox, Mozilla introduced a new phone that it looks very, very cheap and very nice, and it was specifically tailored to developing countries.
To that market.
To that market.
Before we run out of time, I really do want to hear about India. What's the situation there? I mean, we were just talking about the economy, but in terms of smartphone reach and these companies targeting this population, how are they doing? Are they doing it in similar means as China?
No. India has different problems. There's no big manufacturer of smartphones in India yet. They have been trying to, bring companies to make those, but the smartphone industry is now starting to be a closed market, which means if you want to buy that very nice glass, that touch screen, you need to go to specific companies that can produce those glass and can do it cheaply. Apple are very good at it because Apple has agreements for years and years, but in India, we still don't see a company that can do it.
Apple's certainly very exclusive. Well, thank you very much for this review of mobiles. Interesting to see that Samsung when it comes out. Let me know how it is. Looks beautiful. Thank you, Shai. Okay, and also don't forget to watch theTube today at 10:10 p.m. here on I-24 News. That's it for this morning. Visit us on the web or on our Facebook page and have a wonderful day.